Only 55 degrees this morning here at 93.5, 1590 WAKR. And it is time to go to film school with my good friend Joe Fortunato with us, film study professor. It's the month of October, so he is going to stay with that theme. And Joe, I'll kind of bring you in and let you take it from there, my friend. Good morning.
Thanks, Ray. Good morning, everybody. Yes, it is October, and it's time for scary stuff. And we're going to continue that theme this week by celebrating the 55th anniversary of Rosemary's Baby from 1968. In fact, it was released June 12th, 1968. It was directed by Roman Polanski, written by Ira Levin and Roman Polanski. It stars Mia Farrow, John Cassavetes, and Ruth Gordon. It did win one Oscar, and that was for Ruth Gordon as Best Supporting Actress. It did have one nomination for Best Writing. And Mia Farrow, oddly enough, was not nominated for an Oscar for her performance. And to this day, that's sort of considered a notorious Oscar snub, and there's many of those in history. Entertainment Weekly voted this the 10th scariest film of all time. And this was produced by William Castle, who some film fans might know was legendary for his low-budget, wacky gimmicks like Smell-O-Rama and The Tingler and things like that he used to do, ghosts in the theater. So he was, sort of one of those low-budget guys. This was kind of his bid for respectability. He acquired the movie rights to the novel, and Robert Evans, the legendary head of Paramount at the time, agreed to greenlight the project if Castle did not direct. He didn't really want that schlockiness. And like I said, this was due to his reputation of low-budget horror and thriller films. He did make a cameo appearance in the film. But so it's interesting that William Castle was the producer of this. This is sort of a rare example of what we might call urban horror, because horror movies almost always take place in small towns and rural backgrounds, suburbs, things like that. They rarely take place in the big city, and this is the biggest. It's New York City, so that's a little bit unusual. There was sort of a popular belief that Alfred Hitchcock was originally offered the chance to direct the movie. This has sort of been deemed false, and he was never approached, but that's sort of a urban legend that kind of persists, and, it's sort of fun to speculate about something like that. As I said, that, William Castle was known for his gimmicky fare, and it was also a bit of respectability for Mia Farrow, who sort of was known for her TV work, like Peyton Place, and also being Mrs. Frank Sinatra. And in both cases, it worked. It both got William Castle and Mia Farrow to some prominent respectability. We'll tell that Mia Farrow story here in just a moment.
With us is Joe Fortunato, film study professor, going back to the late 60s with a psychological horror film, Rosemary's Baby. Joe, the one thing, and I don't know how much you can expand on, and you've got a lot more to talk about, but the image of that baby at the end is just frightening to me.
Yeah, and they didn't really want to show the baby, and that was, William Castle wanted to display a grotesque demon baby when Mia Farrow looks at the child, but Roman Polanski, the director, sort of vetoed that idea in lieu of a more ambiguous scene. So part of it's sort of imaginary. When Rosemary sees is both the baby and also a flashback to the rape scene, and she looks like at the eyes of the devil, and someone says he's got his father's eyes, and it's sort of almost kind of psycho-esque in sort of what you don't see and what you think you see, and all that kind of stuff. But it's creepy for sure.
Yeah, no.
As I was mentioning, there's a story there about Mia Farrow that's kind of a legendary Hollywood story. Mia Farrow was married to Frank Sinatra at the time, and she left Sinatra to make this film, which ticked off Sinatra, as you can imagine. Sinatra was pressuring Mia Farrow to quit the film as their marriage was suffering, and she was about to relent and quit, but then Paramount head Robert Evans, who I mentioned before, showed her the dailies and said, Mia, you're going to win the Oscar if you do this. And that was all she had to hear, and she continued, I can't say it, with the production. And then several days later, Frank Sinatra served her with divorce papers on the set of the film. The irony is that Farrow didn't win the Oscar. She, in fact, wasn't even nominated. but there was some certainly drama backstage on that. The movie also resurrected Ruth Gordon's career as she parlayed her Oscar-winning success into sort of a number of funny old women roles throughout the 70s, most notably the great Harold and Maude, which maybe we'll do one of these days on film school here. And so she was sort of back in the spotlight. There was a rumor that Sharon Tate appeared unbilled in the party that Rosemary gives for her young friends. Tate was Polanski's first choice to play Rosemary, and you'll know that Polanski and Sharon Tate were in a relationship. But that, again, sort of another famous urban legend. The original cut of the film went over 4 hours, and Roman Polanski couldn't decide what he wanted to cut. So he let the editor decide, which is sort of unusual because, first of all, directors almost always want that control, and Roman Polanski was kind of a stickler for that. So the fact that he sort of turned it over to his editor to say, cut this down for me, is pretty interesting. And, we talk about casting a lot, and Polanski first sort of saw Rosemary as an all-American girl, and he looked at a number of people for that role. Tuesday Weld, Jane Fonda was approached, but she turned it down so she could make Barbarella. And like I said, Sharon Tate was part of the mix there. Julie Christie and a number of other actresses were considered for the role, and it was Robert Evans at Paramount who suggested Mia Farrow based on her work.
Joe, let me ask you this as we wrap it up with you being a film study professor. How do you look at this movie, Rosemary's Baby? I'm not asking necessarily horror movies, but when I look at it, it is to me, one of the scariest movies I've really seen, and the music is really intense. Do you look at this as a really good piece of work?
Well, I don't look at it.
Okay, good.
And I'm sort of joking. Of course, I've seen it. But I'm not, horror is not my genre, so I don't really seek out the horror genre movies. It's a classic. Roman Polanski is a great director, and I think it's an effective film. Whether it's a great film or not, I suppose that may be a little bit subjective, but it's certainly in the pantheon of classics. And, one other thing, I'll just sort of a little bit of trivia. The baby's due date, Rosemary's Baby due date, is June of '66, which otherwise would be 666.
Ah, well done. All right, Joe Fortunato, he took us to film school again today. The movie Rosemary's Baby. Great job, Joe. We'll reconnect again next week.
Okay, great. We'll see you next week.
You got it. Joe Fortunato, film.